Welcome to Take It from the Ironwoman. My name is Susanne Müller, your host and the Ironwoman. This podcast is about empowering yourself and others to make real changes in the world. You will hear from everyday, smart, sophisticated, hip people like you and me. Not everybody has to be an Ironwoman to impress the world. Together, we will learn from the sports and business leaders how you can become a more successful person as an entrepreneur or a leader. It's one step at a time, one day at a time. Take your steps now. Take your big steps now. Join me on this journey to success. Take it from the Ironwoman. We only have a special guest, and today we go to Brigitte in Illinois. She's originally from Göttingen in Germany, and an interesting story. When you check on her website, it says, "Have pigs will travel." This is the book. It's based on a true story. It is the unlikely tale, some many say preposterous story, of a young German woman who moved to the United States in 1980 by herself, made friends, and established a successful livestock farm against all odds. Brigitte, tell us your story. The book is one thing. We want to hear from you. Welcome. I'm excited.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So what brought you to the US from Germany? There's endless opportunities in the US that you brought from Germany, probably so. Where did it all start?
Well, I majored in animal science at the University of Göttingen in Germany, and part of the requirements were internships. So one of my internships ended up being on a family farm in central Illinois. They had a cow and calf herd, cattle. They had pigs, and they had corn and soybean crops. And I spent the summer of 1978 on this farm, and then developed a business plan for the hog farm portion of this family farm as part of my master's thesis, and translated the thesis into English, very proudly presented it to my host, and got it back after 2 days when he said he caught enough hell in his house, he didn't need to keep it around. His wife and sons were deeply offended that I would dare criticize their farm. And my farmer saw the profit potential and said, "If you think you can do all that, come back and show me." I came back. He sponsored me as an immigrant, and I came back after I graduated, started working full-time for him in 1980. 1987, I established my own farm and built a livestock farm up from nothing.
And when you think about that business plan, what were your suggestions? And why do you think he was so resistant, even though you mention it's profitable?
The farmer himself was not resistant as long as it didn't cost him any money other than labor, hiring me. I showed him how he could triple his production in the existing buildings just by improving animal care, animal flow through the buildings, and basically just being a better steward of the animals and having a better breeding program. Cattle are much more prestigious. So both sons and 3 of their friends were taking care of 100 cow and calf pairs. And the pigs that were paying all the bills at the time were really begging for attention because that was not in keeping with their station in life, or so the sons thought. Nobody fought me over taking care of the hogs, but then they were not thrilled with me being there, but that's okay. I learned to tolerate that.
Tell us a little bit more about your own business then. So you said you had 300 clients, you were on the road. How did a typical day look like?
Well, I started building my own herd while I was still working for the original farmer. We found out that we really needed better quality breeding stock for his herd and could not rely on other breeding stock suppliers. Sometimes the pigs were not healthy. Sometimes they had genetic problems. And since I lived on a remote part of his farmstead, I could have a separate herd there, produce breeding stock for his commercial farm. And we went into a business arrangement where he would furnish utilities and feed. I furnish a building that I had bought, a portable building, in my labor, and I bought the animals. And when they were old enough to either breed or sell, he would get half and I would get half. So he would get his boars, the male breeding stock that he really needed for his farm. I would keep the females, and I could either sell them or add them to my herd. So little by little, I built my number of customers to where I really had a decent customer base when I set out on my own. Became good friends and long-term customers. And the very first customer I had only came out to look at the animals because my boss happened to be answering the phone. And this very first customer did not approve of women being out there stealing a job from a man. And so when my boss delivered the breeding stock this customer had selected, he then came back and handed me a fistful of revival literature so I could read up on it and be saved, and I would know my proper place, which was in the house.
Oh, yeah. And when was that? 1900 something?
That was in the year of our Lord, 1980.
And how has that evolved over the years?
It was a challenge in the beginning, but eventually when word got out that I had good hogs and the price was fair and so on and so forth, I became that German woman who has good hogs. And then I was an advertisement in itself. And I would take out classified ads in national livestock publications, and I would get phone calls from pretty much all over the country. I couldn't deliver all of them, but anything I could do within reasonable driving distance, I would deliver myself.
You mentioned that you were on the road for
Yes.
a long time. So what was the radius that you would?
I was in central Illinois. I would go into Iowa, Missouri, Indiana, Kentucky. And sometimes if it was too far to do in one day, we would meet halfway. One trip took me to the parking lot of the Grand Ole Opera in Nashville.
Oh,
A customer from Georgia, from the state of Georgia, met me there, and we unloaded boars tailgate to tailgate. He turned around, went home, and I turned around and went home. Those were all exciting trips. And one of my customers in Illinois had a peach orchard in addition to hogs. So I always made sure he needed new breeding stock during peach season.
sure.
Not all the peaches made at home either.
And how easy, me as a layperson, how easy are hogs to travel with?
They're not easy to travel with. They can get too cold. They can get too hot. They can fight. Your work at home doesn't get done because keeping employees was always a struggle. So those were very long days. I would typically start at 4:30 in the morning loading up a trailer and then feeding everybody who stayed on the farm, spending all day on the road, and then get home after dark and then still feed everybody. And then I could go home. I could go inside. So I made sure I wouldn't deliver animals 2 days back to back. And I needed at least one day at home in between.
And you mentioned employees. How many employees do you have?
Anywhere from 1 to 3. The downside was that when the weather was bad and you needed them the worst, they would not show up. That was a struggle. So the best employees I had, hands down, by a wide margin, were 2 young women from Sweden who were interns on my farm. The University of Minnesota has an exchange program for international ag students, and they too had a hard time placing women. And I had a spare room in the house. I had a guest room. So first one of them worked with me, and then the second one came. And I stayed in contact with them. In fact, this summer, I'll go back to Sweden to visit them.
Wow.
So, and I still call them my kids, even though they are now 48 and 52 years old.
They're still kids. Yeah.
Yes, they have families of their own, and they were delightful. They were smart. They were good at what they were doing. And part of the program is that they're not just workers on the farm. they go where you go. So you're supposed to also show them part of the area where you're living. And it was a really good experience all around. And
And
of course, the local rumor mill kicked into high gear. It was decided that I had gotten myself pregnant early on, had gone to Germany to give birth, and now I had brought my daughter back to stay with me. It's amazing what people come up with if they have nothing better to do.
not only are you the German lady with the hogs, but all of a sudden you also have a daughter.
Yeah, who just showed up.
And how did the book come about? What is the inspiration for the book?
I thought it was such a good story, and I had so many little vignettes and little stories that I would tell people every now and then, and they said, "This stuff is good. You really should be writing a book." So I started and I stopped, and I started and I stopped, and never got off the ground. And then COVID hit, and I thought, if I don't do this now, during lockdown, it'll never get done. Then it took off, and I ended up working with a coach who made me a better writer and got it ready for submitting it to literary agents. And that's been also a really good experience.
And it seems a lot of people during the COVID times were using that downtime. But I'm also wondering, how did you get through the COVID time with your farm and your business? How did that go?
Yeah.
Life goes on. Life goes on.
By that time, I was well into my second career. The farm did better and better. Every year was better than the year before. 97 was my best year. In 1998, I had to start closing the doors. At that time, the packing industry, the meat packers, had reached full vertical integration where they owned all the pigs from the breeding barn to the consumer's dinner plate. And they would primarily buy pigs out of their own facilities and forced all the family hog farmers out of business. My 300 customers went out of business to practically overnight. And then I was down to 3, and then those 3 went out, and so did I. If you have no place to sell your breeding stock, or you have no place to sell your market hogs, then you're just done. Because they use their market force in an illegal way by tying access to their slaughter capacity, tying that to use of their proprietary genetics. They could drive family farmers out of business by paying us 5 cents per pound or 8 cents per pound for market hogs that cost 45 cents per pound to produce. There was just no way to continue. And they had bought enough politicians at the time that they got away with it and nobody stopped them. And it's still the case today that the mega hog farms are pretty much all that you see out there. Family farmers, if they still have hogs, they are under contract and they feed hogs for the packing plants. So it's very sad, and it's an entire lifestyle disappeared. And it was stressful enough that it ruined my health. So I was 45 years old when it stopped. And due to my health, I had to have a job that provided health insurance. And I became a certified financial planner, an investment advisor, and eventually, fast forward another 20 years. And the last few years in the workforce, I combined those 2 skills and helped farmers with estate planning to get them ready to meet with lawyers to put our plan into place. And there's a lot of planning and a lot of care that goes into it. Say you have 1 child that comes home to farm and you have 2 more that have jobs elsewhere. If you were to split the farm 3 ways, you made farming impossible for the one who stayed home. Treating everybody exactly equal is not necessarily fair. The one who stayed home helped you grow the business. But how do we treat the other 2 in a fair manner? And what really concerned parents was, how do we make sure those kids still get along after we're gone? Because people don't behave well when there's money involved. So that took a lot of work, and it was incredibly interesting, incredibly rewarding work. And there was something humbling about an old grizzled farmer taking his cap off, glasses come off, and the eyes get wet, and said, "Thank you. Thank you for helping us through this. I was so worried. I couldn't sleep. I didn't know what would happen to the farm after I was gone." That's kind of the happy ending of the saga. The book itself ends midway. It ends with me shutting down the farm because there was just no way forward.
So the book is in a way a happy ending of what you have built. It seems like you're a very innovative person with great ideas, and you combine your experience now with the finances together in order to help you.
Yes, and there's a second book coming.
Okay, there we go.
With the second half, more stories.
And what kind of stories? Share a few with us, with the listeners, that you have in the first book.
Some of the stories are about my customers and what motivated them. Mm-hmm. Why would they do business with me when they had other options? Mm-hmm. The first one that came to mind was a farmer about the age of my dad or my then employer, and his own father had died quite young from a heart attack, and his mother tried to carry on with the farming business, and my customer never forgot how badly she was treated and what a hard life she had as a widowed woman trying to carry on the farm. And he was too young to do anything about it at the time, but by golly, he was going to do something this time. And so he did business with me, and when he retired, I ended up renting his buildings. I could expand my operation, and that was just a good relationship.
I'm still amazed how you, from that business plan, from your master thesis, when you listen to your story, the red thread that goes through innovation, expansion, relationship, all that comes together is beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I never intended to stay. My dad traveled a lot for his job. Mother was a stay-at-home homemaker, and I thought Dad's job was way more interesting. But since there was no way that I could have a farm in Germany, I thought I would spend my life traveling, being an international ag consultant. And I thought I could spend some time in the United States, get my feet wet. In a way, that would be my first overseas assignment. And I had no intention to stay, but I could find out if I had what it took to be an international consultant. And then I grew roots and I made friends and canceled the rest of the journey. I'm still here. Yeah, since we had a long lockdown, I spend a lot of time reading, and I know what kind of books I like and what I enjoy, and the storytelling, and you follow the author along. Mm-hmm. And I don't have to be an expert in all the things I read about, but they make it easy to follow along. So I try to do something similar. Yeah. You don't have to be a pig expert to enjoy the book.
I'm sure. What do you do when you don't work? It seems like work is such a huge part of your life. Is there anything else that you do?
I travel and I read and I enjoy retirement in between all that. Right now, I'm listening to an audiobook. It's called The Unfinished Love Story. It's by Doris Kearns Goodwin, about the time she spent with her husband. And husband was an advisor and a staffer for President Kennedy. And Doris Kearns, at that time, Doris Kearns Goodwin was a staffer for Lyndon Johnson. So this is the story of their married life and looking through all the papers that he had preserved, that her husband had preserved. And what makes it so interesting, the audiobook also has original audio clips of Kennedy speeches in it. Uh-huh. The book before that I read is called Salt Path. Fascinating. It's about a couple in England who lived on a farm. They had a bed and breakfast type farm. And through events completely out of their control, they lost their farm and lost everything they had ever worked for. And at the same time, husband is diagnosed with a terminal diagnosis. So they set out on a 680-mile walk around the perimeter of England, living desperately poor, pulling a few pounds out of the ATM machine every week. The descriptions of the people they meet and the scenery and the hardships and all that. And the husband's illness goes into remission. It's a captivating book, and I could relate to it 100%.
And where can we find you? Where can we find your books if the listener are interested?
The book is not yet published. We're still looking forward to that. But there is a chapter you can read if you like on my website.
Mm-hmm.
The website is brigittefranzen.com. And people sometimes have trouble spelling my first name. So if you Google Have Pigs Will Travel, it should also take you to the website.
Wonderful. We'll find you. Thank you so much for giving us a glimpse into your interesting life, to your innovative life, and also what I appreciate that you never gave up, even when you come with a business plan and the farmer says, no, you kept going. Thank you so much for doing all the good work.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
What a cool conversation. We never know where life will take us. What are you taking away from this cool conversation? An immigrant woman providing business plan, being successful, writing a book. Much more to come. Don't give up. Don't give up. Take it from the Ironwoman. We have episodes every Monday. We can learn with great people, ask questions, don't be shy. And also Take It from the Ironwoman is the book Global Business Coaching with Sports Parallels. Get it in your local bookstore or download it and write a review, like us, subscribe.